Hello, dear friends. This article is addressed to intelligent beings. A few words are enough for the wise. Opinion piece. Tipping point. Will the power structure change? People are starting to ask questions. The dark side has made many mistakes. It's not about money, it's about power and control. The plan was for 2050, but they moved it up to 2020. There is a much better world at the end of this tunnel. Tragedy should be used as a sword of strength. The enormity of what is coming will shock the world. Europe is the most important battlefield in this war. The silent majority is becoming the angry majority. China to release 10 million tons of polluting coal. Pegasus program spied Amlo and Macrom, among many others. Havana Syndrome hits US diplomats in Vienna. Investors are on the lookout for a collapse, but prices keep rising. Mother of all crises is just around the corner, investors say. Let's start. We are about to reach tipping point because the dark side is making so many mistakes. They are trying to rush because the original plan was to get this going in 2050. But those involved in this got greedy and moved things to up to 2030 and then to 2020. And that's the reason they are making so many mistakes, according to Dr. Rainer Fulmich. Tragedy should be used as a source of strength. According to a Tibetan saying, the tipping point is the magic moment when an idea, trend or social behavior crosses a threshold, hits and spreads like wildfire. According to Malcolm Gladwell, the turning point in the process of growing up and maturing occurs when you discover the core of the force that lives within you and that can survive every wound, according to Max Lerner. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, which is a much better world because it's so destructive most of the things we have become accustomed to in our way of life, both personally and globally. There is too much injustice and too many people trying to take advantage of other people, and that will change. There has been progress, and you have to look at the bright side because more and more people are starting to ask questions. That's progress in itself. Power and money. Some 3,000 super rich people in the self-styled corporate political elite are trying to gain control over the rest of the world. It's not about money, it's about power. But they are using money to bribe people and using psychological techniques to manipulate or threaten. Some politicians are bribed or threatened. Globalism is what brought us here. It's about private global organizations run by the super rich that have taken control over the rest of the world. Once people understand this, it won't be too hard to turn the tables on them. These are the people responsible for the financial crisis of 10 or 12 years ago. For 30 years, this group of people have been stealing taxpayers' money all over the world. The first financial crisis should have been the perfect opportunity to find out what is going on. They managed to tell us they had everything under control. They didn't, but they started printing money to keep us quiet. They should have learned that it makes no sense to print money to restore what they have stolen. At the end of 2019, when things were again coming to a head and were about to explode again, they started with a diversionary tactic. However, we have to keep it in mind that it's not a monolithic wall on the other side, because there is a lot of infighting and conflicting interests, and that is another opportunity we have. It is one of those sleight on hand tricks, just like the organization that changed the definition to create this. That means there is a huge fight going on about whether they can make this mandatory or not. But they can't mandate at this point because it would clash with all the laws and international conventions. Optimism. We have reason to be optimistic right now because we can see all the mistakes that are being made on the other side. So we are close to a tipping point. The power structure will be completely different after we reach this tipping point. It is possible that in the end a special court will be created, because the national courts will not be able to deal with a matter of such magnitude. The reason of why Europe is at the center of all this is because it is probably the most important battlefield in this whole war. The European Central Bank is totally broken because it bought all these bonds and papers that are worthless, and the pension funds are completely broke. If people find this out, that they have nothing left despite spending so much money on their pensions, then they would have a big problem. That is one of the reasons why they are trying to keep Europe under control before people understand what is going on. Disclosure. The most important thing is to get the information, truth and facts out to as many people as possible. But don't waste your time with those people who are on the other side aggressively and really want to be blessed, in quotes. It is tragic, but we will not be able to save everyone. Our hand is extended to them, so if they change their minds, they are always welcome on board. But the 10% or 20% of the population who are between, or maybe more, are starting to ask questions, even though we are the ones who will turn the tables. And that is why we have to focus on the best possible way to do it and connect with each other. This also makes sense on a spiritual level, because if we were to lose the battle, it would be the end of humankind. If we as human beings were to lose the battle against crazy people, that's the reason why we cannot lose and why we must win. And that is what they want us to believe. That's the reason so much money and so much effort has gone into the mainstream propaganda media. Most cab drivers are well informed because they don't watch TV and get information from the independent alternative media. There is only 0.00001 of the population that is trying to gain control over all of us. The rest of the people, the ones who are falling into the trap, play no role. The most important thing is to get as much information as possible, to spread it as much as possible, if as many human beings are connected globally. That gives a certain strength on a very spiritual level, which goes far beyond the ability to exchange information. There are different levels of consciousness that go beyond the rational. Opinions. The silent majority is becoming the angry majority. The days of the quiet silent majority are over. It is time to raise our voices and to take action. Otherwise, the world you love will be lost forever. Rome versus Babylon, according to Benjamin Fulford. The undeclared civil war in the West has opened up a long-hidden schism in Western civilization. The contradiction between the Egyptian and Mesopotamian traditions of Babylon and the Greco-Roman Germanic European traditions of Rome. Babylon gave us monotheism, financial accounting, and much of modern medicine, while Rome gave us a military, a science, a rule of law, and a strong democracy. So now in the news, we see Babylon using the control of money to bribe governments and to scare people into a single totalitarian and monolithic power structure. Those who believe in the rule of law and democracy are fighting against this structure. There is no doubt that Rome will prevail in this battle. The reason is that the Creator is on her side. What this means is that science, the study of facts based on observation, will prevail over the endlessly repeated lies. The enormity of what is coming will shock the world. Be prepared for the shock wave. The truth and facts are coming out. People are going to wake up and understand that they were controlled by deceitful players. The dark side will deploy every asset it has to stop this. Be prepared for a communications blackout on day zero. Puffness said, "We are confident that things are being resolved and that the crooks are being stopped, and that efforts to break the stalemate are always being scaled back and are becoming ever more elegant. Be sure to see clearly and understand. Know that the cooks and the doctors, the engineers and the lawyers cannot make one iota of change in any of this until the obstacles are removed." The Descent into Madness by Victor Davis Hanson. Nations have often gone mad in a matter of months. The French abandoned that supposedly idealistic revolutionary project and turned it into a monster hell for a year between July 1793-1794. After the November 1860 election, in a matter of weeks, Americans went from thinking secession was taboo to visions of killing the greatest. Mao's China went from a failed communist state to Dante's ninth circle of hell when he unleashed the Cultural Revolution in 1966. Economy. A whale investor buys some 30,000 bitcoins. This mystery actor has held 18 wallets with 8,000 bitcoins each for more than 2 years. Coinciding with the bitcoin's recent loss in value, which stands slightly above $30,000, a mysterious Maya player bought 29,880 units of the cryptocurrency last weekend. The assets were acquired between the last July 16th and July 18th for about $950 million. World's largest cryptocurrency exchange burns through nearly $400 million. Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, has taken nearly 1.3 million units of its native token BNB out of circulation, worth $393 million. This is the 16th token burn that the company has conducted. IMF urges countries to shift from economic bailout to reforms. The International Monetary Fund's number 2 official on Tuesday called on countries to shift from saving their economies from collapse to reviving growth-oriented policy reforms to boost their recovery prospects and make them more sustainable. Brexit faces a litmus test. Britain has set an accelerated pace in the electric vehicle race with its 2030 ban on the sale of new fossil fuel-powered cars and has offered £1 billion to kickstart its battery industry and partners. Wall Street opens higher. Wall Street major indexes opened higher on Tuesday as economically sensitive stocks rebounded after a sharp sell-off in the previous session, while IBM shares rose on strong second quarter results. The digital dollar scares Wall Street. Change generates resistance, and even more so if it affects the interest of a powerful minority. The idea of a digital dollar backed by the Federal Reserve excites many, but generates strong rejection in Wall Street financial circles. The mother of all crises is just around the corner, according to investors. Since the 2008 financial crisis, many have been wondering when the next crash will occur. More than a few financial experts have recognized that the healthcare crisis brought with the perfect ingredients for an explosive cocktail. Confinement wreaked economic havoc in every country, and new variants have put government recovery plans in check. However, the stock market has reached record highs during this time, while the new cryptocurrency market is booming. Are we really facing a financial crisis of mammoth proportions? Investors think so. The transitory inflation ruse. Markets were looking for signs that the period of transitory inflation was coming to an end. They missed the point when the June CPI was much hotter than expected. Pegasus talked about the latest price data and said it reveals the little secret, that all this talk about transitory inflation is a ruse. What if this is the final economic cycle? A few months ago, Morgan Stanley's chief equity strategist Michael Wilson warned that the ongoing correction in the market portends a 10% to 20% drop in stocks, and summed up the current economic state simply as mid-cycle. The US recession ended in April 2020. The recession lasted only 2 months and ended with a low point reached in April 2020 following the onset of a sharp drop in economic activity in March of that year. Yellen wants rules for stable coins. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen told regulators on Monday that the US government should act quickly to establish a regulatory framework for stable coins, a fast-growing type of digital currencies. Spain. The Spanish government authorizes merger of Unicaja and Liberbank. Spain's government gave the go-ahead for the merger of Unicaja and Liberbank banks, which will create Spain's fifth largest bank by assets. Public debt rises again in May and sets another record. The debt accumulated by the public administrations as a whole rose again in May, after the decline recorded in April, and set a new all-time high, representing a year-on-year increase of 11.4%. Electricity prices set a new all-time high in Spain. The average price of electricity in the wholesale market has set an all-time high at 106.57 euros per megawatt hour. With this price, which remains above 100 euros, electricity exceeds the historical maximum of 103.76 euros megawatts per hour, set on January 11th, 2002, which is 2.81 euros more. The Spanish government plans to exhume the remains of Primo de Rivera. First it was Franco and now José Antonio Primo de Rivera. The Spanish government announced on Tuesday its intention to carry out the exhumation of the remains of the leader of the Spanish Falange, The decision is made in the framework of the draft bill for the democratic memory law, which includes the change of meaning of the always controversial Valle de los Caídos, or Valley of the Fallen. Hispanoamerica. Mexico's drug cartels are stealing oil again. Systemic theft of crude oil and petroleum products, especially gasoline theft, was long plagued Mexico's hydrocarbon sectors, and it is estimated that organized crime groups are earning up to $400 million annually from the theft of oil and refined products. Inflation continues in Venezuela. Venezuela has been in a hyperinflationary process for years that seems to have no end, in a context that puts the quality of life of citizens at the limit, deteriorates their purchasing power, and increases inequality. Money overs. Pressure mounts on tech companies. President Biden on Tuesday nominated attorney Jonathan Kanter as antitrust chief at the Justice Department in the latest sign that the White House is determined to rein in the world's largest corporation, especially the tech giants. Government demands to remove journalists' tweet up 26%. Twitter announced Wednesday that government demands to remove content posted by journalists and media outlets increased 26% worldwide in the second half of 2020 compared to the first half of the year. Bankruptcy maneuver. J&J is exploring to plan to shed liabilities from widespread baby powder litigation by creating a new business that would then seek bankruptcy protection. It looks like an asset lifting. A J&J legal representative told plaintiffs' lawyers that the company may try to place a subsidiary in bankruptcy as part of a strategy to settle thousands of claims linking the product to ovarian cancer. China. 4 Chinese nationals indicted on hacking charges. 4 Chinese nationals have been charged in a global hacking campaign targeting dozens of companies, universities, and government agencies worldwide, the Justice Department said Monday. Subway passengers trapped with water almost up to their necks and cars floating in heavy flooding in China. At least 31 servers in Henan province have already exceeded alert levels. Heavy rains that have been lashing China's Henan province since last weekend have overflowed rivers, resulting in flooded streets in a dozen cities, where subway passengers have been trapped by floodwaters. China to release 10 million tons of polluting coal. China will release more than 10 million tons of coal from its state reserves, with the potential for further releases with market demand. It aims to stabilize rising prices due to industrial activity. Tokyo 2020 director doesn't rule out cancelling the games. The head of the Tokyo 2020 organizing committee on Tuesday didn't rule out cancelling the Olympics if cases increased as more athletes tested positive and sponsors dropped plans to attend Friday's opening ceremony. Europe. New European anti-money laundering measures. Following a series of scandals, including the laundering of 200 billion by Denmark's Danske Bank, Brussels plans to create a new supervisory agency for dirty money. Its package of legislative proposals seeks to strengthen rules while countering terrorist financing. Havana Syndrome strikes US diplomats in Vienna. The New Yorker reported Friday that State Department and intelligence officials were investigating a recent spate of mysterious illnesses that have afflicted U.S. diplomats in Vienna. Sources say many of the symptoms resemble those experienced by diplomats in Cuba in 2016-17. Germany. German government failed to foresee floods. A new report in the British newspaper The Sunday Times explains how a satellite in low Earth orbit detected the first signs of danger days before the German floods developed. Somewhere along the chain of command, climate scientists and government officials to local officials failed to inform residents of the affected regions about the need to evacuate before the extreme weather broke down and resulted in the country's worst natural disaster in 6 decades. German rescuers raced to avert health emergency in flooded areas. Red Cross volunteers and emergency services in Germany deployed emergency standpipes and mobile vans in flood-ravaged region in Tuesday in a bid to avert a public health emergency. Water war. Manufactured draft to cause food shortages. The water war has begun. The state is simply shutting off water to farms and ranches, depriving them of the water needed to grow food and raise animals. This will create food shortages by design, then declare it to be global warming. Lake Powell state of emergency. Lake Powell is receiving an emergency release of water from upstream reservoirs. Water levels in the lake are at historic lows. If the level drops much further, the hydroelectric turbines will stop operating. The lake supplies water to 30 million people and irrigates 5 million acres. Espionage. Macron's cell phone was targeted by Pegasus spy. A cell phone belonging to French President Emmanuel Macron was among the targets of spying by the Israeli Pegasus program, reported Tuesday the media consortium that revealed the scandal. The information doesn't specify if Macron's phone could have been finally spied on by the Israeli program, since for that it is necessary to analyze the terminal in search of the intrusion. Amlo was spied on by Peña Nieto's government with the Israeli program Pegasus. The President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, denounced that espionage against journalists and activists was also directed against him and his family throughout the Israeli program Pegasus acquired during the previous administrations. The revelations about the scope of spying in some countries throughout the Pegasus program raised a wave of condemnations around the world on Monday for the use of this type of military intelligence methods in the tracking of private information of journalists, politicians, and human rights defenders, among others. Cyber spying weapon to target politicians, activists, and journalists. South Front reports that spyware from an Israeli company was used in attempted and successful attacks on 37 smartphones belonging to journalists, government officials, and human rights activists around the world, according to an investigation by 70 media organizations published July 18th. The Washington Post said the Pegasus spyware licensed from Israeli-based NSO Group was also used to target phones. The Guardian writes that the investigation suggested widespread and ongoing abuse of NSO's hacking software, described as malware that infects smartphones to enable the extraction of messages, photos, and emails, secretly records calls, and activate microphones. Pegasus is a highly advanced malware that infects iOS and Android devices to allow spyware operators to copy messages, photos, calls, and other data, including secretly activating microphones and cameras. The leak contained a list of 50,000 phone numbers that NSO customers have identified as persons of interest since 2016. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.